In a previous video, I explained to you how God led me through a process of transformation, often through disruptions to my plans and circumstances, deepening my trust in Him and maturing my faith. When I considered as trials or difficulties, disruptions to my excellent plans were sometimes my own mistakes, but much more often were God's opportunities for growth and service, although I didn't see them that way in the moment. Proverbs 16:9 says, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." When God leads, He always leads you toward good, whether you see it that way in the moment or not. In this video, I want to answer a question you might easily wish to ask, namely, after over 50 years of walking with Jesus, of following Him and being transformed by Him, what have you learned? What big life lesson can you tell us about? Just how have you been transformed? Fair question. And I'll answer it with this story. About 30 years into this walk with Christ, I was sitting with a family friend who offered to walk me through a kind of personal inventory of relationships, accomplishments, goals, personality types, values, etc. It took the form of a placemat. Each of the four corners dealt with one or another of those categories, with the middle, the very center of the placemat, displaying your values, specifically your highest or governing value. There was a list of possible values to choose among, and you went through them, selecting the ones you saw as most like you, then selected again from that shorter list, and then again from an even shorter list, until finally you whittled it down to the one that topped your list. I wasn't surprised at what I chose as my highest value, but at the same time I was stunned by the truth of it. I had chosen autonomy. And by autonomy, I mean personal autonomy, the ability to make my own decisions and choose which way I want to go, an independence of thought and action. Now, by this time, I'd been married for close to 30 years, and you'd think I might have figured out that by then that this was not a value that was conducive to a well-oiled marriage. And I had figured that part out, having learned to share with Diane what I was thinking well in advance of being able to do anything about it, to get her feedback, input, and maybe concurrence. But what I hadn't figured out was how integral personal autonomy was to satisfaction in my work life. I hadn't realized how closely my career ambitions were linked to my core value of personal autonomy. In the course of my 45 years chasing a paycheck, I had discovered that there were two roles that I enjoyed far more than others: that of a trusted advisor to leadership, or that of being a leader with responsibility for a piece of the business. In each of these roles, I had a good level of autonomy, either because I was the guy who had the freedom to run my department, or because I was the technical expert attached to a senior leader to whom I could offer expertise and counsel in whatever way I thought best. I could choose how to advise or choose how to run my shop. So I actively sought after roles like these, and from time to time found them and enjoyed them. Other times, when I had to run all my ideas up the flagpole and see if anybody saluted, or where I had to ask permission rather than seek forgiveness after the fact, those were ones where I chafed at that authority, which was often stubborn and stale. My desire for personal autonomy drove my personal ambition. That is, until career ambition was finally beaten out of me with a job change in 2017. The year before, I had been named the leader of a new business unit and profit center at my company, responsible for a portion of our business that had previously been a sideline, but a growing one. I could assemble my own team, figure out the allocation of expenses, examine our pricing and distribution, design reports on performance, the whole 9 yards. It was a challenge, but one I had always wanted. My ambition had paid off. Until in June of 2017, when we got a new CEO who swept the place clean, eliminating about a dozen senior officers and bringing in her own people, which was her right. I made it longer than most, but in September of 2017, my business unit got cut, and so did I. Suddenly, I was 63 years old, with a mortgage, so not yet able to retire, and looking for work. Actually, I had been through this kind of thing more than once before and had learned that no matter how much you may love and admire the company you worked for, the company will never love you back. It's like that line from The Godfather. It ain't personal. It's strictly business. Yeah, but it's personal if you're affected by it, and I was. My ambition took a hard blow that day. The weakness of it was exposed. Ambition can blind you to reality. Just read Ecclesiastes for a taste of reality under the sun. God helped me through that crisis, as He always does. And by January of 2018, I was working again. In banking, an industry I didn't know and had to learn from scratch. My brother-in-law, God bless him, pointed me toward a role he thought I was well suited for and one that would be helpful if I could adapt to it. Yes, it was in northern Wisconsin, 7 hours away from where my wife lived, so I could only see her once or twice a month, plus the added cost of a second residence and the loss of 30% of my income, but God helped us through it. He led. I just followed. It took me about 18 months to earn my boss's trust, but eventually I became that trusted advisor to him. I felt like I was finishing strong, doing something hard but something useful, bringing my own ideas to bear on that job. Plus, we were able to pay off the mortgage and get our house in order to be ready to retire. Then COVID hit. What a blessing from God that was for us. They sent everybody home to work remotely, and that meant I was back in Iowa for my last year and a half. Praise God. Every cloud has a silver lining, and that was it for us. By the time I was able to retire in late summer 2021, that last bit of personal ambition was gone, defeated, put to death. I had none left. And what do you know? Personal autonomy was no longer as high a value for me. That was the first inkling I had that they were correlated. And I'm an actuary. I understand correlation, but it hadn't dawned on me that there was correlation in here. I remember being on one of my 5-mile walks on the Greenbelt in Clive and having a conversation with God about this. What the Lord showed me were several verses from Proverbs and Psalms about man making his plans, but God directing his steps. About the steps of a man being ordered by the Lord, and the Lord delighting in his way, holding his hand so that he doesn't fall. About trusting in Him with our whole heart, not on our own understanding, to acknowledge Him in all our ways, and Him making our paths straight. Even the roll of the dice, or casting of the lot, as it says, seemingly random outcomes are determined by God. Now, I had already known all these verses. They were all familiar, but I hadn't considered a key implication of them for me. Directing my path, guiding my steps, determining the course of my life is God's job. Mine is not planning all these things and wondering why God is not following my plans. Mine is following His lead. He will lead regardless. I will go where He wants me to go. So much better if I let Him show me where and how. Let Him set the direction and the pace. My job is to follow and keep in step with the Spirit. Not run ahead, not lag behind, but keep in step with the Spirit where He is leading me. So on a 5-mile walk, on a trail near home, God confronts me on autonomy. I see, finally, that autonomy and ambition are in direct conflict with His sovereignty over my life. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and all who dwell in it, including me. I am not my own. I have been bought with a price. Therefore, glorifying God is my job. It is His job to direct my steps. It's my job to walk with Him in it wherever He leads. To not run ahead or lag behind, not pull to the left or to the right, but to keep in step with the Spirit. To let Him hold my hand as we walk, so that I stay with Him. That is the lesson that I learned. To embrace His sovereign leadership over my life and not my own ambition.